Alrighty, everybody. Welcome to CivicTechYYC. I'm Ross Platel and just hosting for us tonight. Tonight our feature event is affordable electricity with microgeneration featuring solar offset. And we've got Graham and Aubrey from Solar Offset here tonight, and there's their contact information there. Just a land acknowledgement to get us started this evening. CivicTechYYC is an organization that resides on the traditional territories of the People's 7 Treaty Region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot First Nation tribes of Siksika, Kainai, Kainai, Stoney Nakoda First Nations of Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. And this is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and Métis Nation Alberta Region 3. The civic tech movement is the use of technology for public good. So we use data and design to address challenges that citizens or governments are facing, help citizens and governments work together to use technology and design, pursue opportunities for greater citizen engagement and more effective services, as well as grow public engagement and enhance digital services in ways that are inclusive, responsive, innovative, open, and data-centered. If you can see here, Civic Tech just resides in the middle of citizens, civil society, community challenges, government, public sector, and digital service challenges. It's a global movement. Civic Tech has grown dramatically over the last 15 years with the help of organizations like Code for All. In the US, cities like Chicago, Boston, New York have led the civic tech movement with important organizations such as Code for America, the US Digital Service, and 18F. There are civic tech organizations in many locations around Canada listed on the Code for Canada website, and also with government agencies like the Canadian Digital Service. CivicTechYYC was launched in 2017 by bringing together people who had an interest in improving their community through technology and by leveraging the support of the City of Calgary and the Rainforest Alberta Network. As a driving force to break down the barriers between sector silos and create space for collaboration, addressing challenges and opportunities of citizens and government. And Civic Tech just resides in the middle of citizens, government communities, and the city and digital strategies, as well as the entrepreneurship space and the technology space. And just some of the other aspects that we have that kind of filter into Civic Tech: digital transformation, digital rights, open data, platform co-ops, makerspaces, all of it just kind of comes together to create that technology ecosystem. And with data in the social sector, the amount and importance of data over recent years has been increasing, especially with COVID, we've seen that. And organizations are trying to leverage the power of data-informed decision-making. Many people lack the skills and resources to collect and understand the data and make better decisions. And data professionals with knowledge and skills want to become more engaged. And here at Civic Tech, we promote volunteer projects and opportunities to be able to create those connections and make those projects happen. With data-informed learning and decision-making, it's all part of the knowledge pyramid. You have the foundation, which is data, and then from that you get information to create knowledge and get wisdom, and that's how you create good decisions and data-informed decisions. Some of the major projects we worked on, there's the Civic Election Survey that we ran last year. There's an ongoing project that I'm hosting, which you can reach out about, which is the Civic Tech Election app. We've had blockchain experiments testing out different blockchain technology implementations, not just cryptocurrencies, but other blockchain technologies, as well as Volley, our volunteering app that Alice Lamb started, which you can check out at www.volleyapp.com. And we've also got our civic user testing groups. These are grassroots groups that facilitate better, more inclusive and accessible usability testing that engages residents in the creation of technology that's meant to serve them. It's a concept that originally started in Chicago and has spread across other cities, including Toronto's GRIP program and now Calgary with Inclusity. The Inclusity Calgary is a team of technologists, designers, employees, community organizers, entrepreneurs, and policy analysts combined with other engaged citizens. We have a shared vision that Calgary can be an accessible city for all. And our mission is to plan, design, engage, and run testing sessions with an inclusive and representative group of Calgarians to be able to improve the usability of products, processes, services, and teams in the public, as well as private and not-for-profit sectors. We're proudly supported by the Calgary Foundation, and it was started in partnership with one of the other groups that some of you may be aware of, which is Calgary UX. And then speaking of other partner groups, here's the full list of partner organizations that we've worked with on projects or have been working on projects. So Code for Canada is their main partner one. There's Calgary UX that I mentioned. There's also Data for Good, which is more data specific side. Rainforest Alberta, which I mentioned previously. The Civic or the YYC Data Society, Platform Calgary with their building opening up to events and formally opening up later on this year, as well as Immigrant Techies Alberta, which is a resource for immigrants and technology here. And lastly, there's just our contact information for the rest of our handles with CivicTechYYC there. So you can go ahead and check us out. Now, I'm going to stop my screen share, and Graham, I think you're ready to go and get us started on some solar offset information there.
Okay, hopefully you can all see the screen.
Yeah, it looks good. Thank you.
Okay, and you can hear me, so that's good. Okay, good evening, everyone. Excited to be here, and appreciate everybody giving up part of their evening to join us and kind of learn a little bit about what solar offset is. We really appreciate this opportunity to talk to everyone about this program. It's something I'm really very excited about, having got started here over the last few months, so I'm very much excited to share. I'm looking forward to answering all your questions. So I'm just going to dive into things here. Presentation itself shouldn't be too long. So let's just see, make sure. So in terms of an agenda, so myself and Aubrey here, give everyone a wave. Aubrey are kind of the team that are behind solar offset. So just a quick introduction, I guess, to both of us here in just a second. And then we're just going to talk a little bit about just the solar resource in Alberta, just kind of a bit of context for people. You're all here. You probably all realize that, it's a pretty sunny place to live. We're quite lucky to have that, but just how does that compare to everything else? I'm not sure if maybe my presentation there is automatically going to start skipping through slides. Maybe it is. Showing that my skills with PowerPoint are not the best in the world. I'll then give you an overview of solar offset, and then we'll have time for questions. So just a quick background to me. I've been working in the kind of Alberta carbon markets and involved in greenhouse gas emissions accounting for greenhouse gas emission reduction projects, carbon footprinting for organizations, third-party kind of auditing and verification of the same since 2007. So I've been in this space professionally for a very long time. I kind of had a little bit of a personal epiphany about a year and a half ago when I finally got around to putting solar panels on my own home, which was a long-standing ambition of mine. That I kind of realized that this was something that was missing in Alberta, which was an opportunity for homeowners, farmers, and other kind of owners of small-scale renewable energy were not able to participate in the carbon markets that I've been working in for most of my professional career in Alberta. So solar offsets, kind of putting two and two together. We'll get into that, but I've been in this space for a long time, and yeah, the kind of carbon markets are my sort of specialty professionally. And Aubrey, if you want to just say a quick hello and a little bit about yourself. You are on mute. There we go.
I was clicking unmute and it was not letting me unmute myself.
I thought I made you co-host there. I'm sorry I didn't make you co-host, and that was why.
All good, all good. Yeah, so Aubrey Blair-Pattison. So I'm a developer. So I'm new to the greenhouse gas accounting stuff, but I'm learning lots with Graham, and came on to help build the solar offset on the data side. So building the app that we're going to use to aggregate the data. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. So I've had some experience with kind of startups. So this is not my first rodeo on kind of getting something rolling. So yeah, Graham, you can give your spiel.
Okay, thank you, Aubrey. All right. So we'll move on then, and just sort of talking about solar in Alberta here. On the left here, you've got obviously a map of Alberta there, but it's kind of showing you what's called the solar installation, which is basically the amount of solar energy that arrives at various points in Alberta. So this is expressed here in the units of kilowatt hours per kilowatt of installed solar capacity, basically. So for every, if you've got 1,000 kilowatt hours per kilowatt, and you had a, yeah, this is obviously on automatic read through, sorry. So if you've got 1,000 kilowatt hours, you've got, per kilowatt, and you've got, a 10 kilowatt system, you're going to get 10,000 kilowatt hours a year on average. Okay, obviously the weather varies. But you can see that what we've got then here is obviously the further south you go, the better the resources. The further north, the further west you go in the province, respectively, the worse that gets. I picked out just some various areas here on the graph on the right, just to kind of illustrate how things go. You can see that a system in Fort McMurray, for example, would expect to get 1,179 kilowatt hours for every kilowatt of solar that's installed. And the exact same system in Medicine Hat would be getting 1,368 kilowatt hours per kilowatt. You can see that it does make quite a big difference, where you're putting that system. But having said that, let's put this in context. Alberta still has the second best solar resource of any province in Canada. And even the bad areas in Alberta, like Fort McMurray, are still getting essentially the same amount of solar installation as you would get in Ontario or in Quebec on average, and they're still getting a better solar resource than BC or any of the maritime provinces. So, it's relative. Medicine Hat and Lethbridge, sure, they're better than up north in Fort McMurray, but even in the north of Alberta, the solar resource in our province is still very, very good. So how has kind of solar, at the micro scale kind of developed in Alberta? Well, this is information here from the Alberta Energy System Operator. And you can see kind of this is from the last sort of 5 years. We've had a 5-fold increase essentially in the number of kind of solar installations. So you look back at 2016, there were just over 1,000, around about 1,500 systems that were installed. And we're now at about 8,000. So we've seen a pretty rapid kind of explosion in this area just over the last few years. More and more people are starting to install or consider installing solar systems. And so the total capacity of installed micro generation in the province has risen from 10 megawatts to around 125 megawatts in the same time. 125 megawatts, you're starting to talk about, to put that in context for people maybe not familiar with that, there are operational power plants out there that are less than that, large sort of cogeneration plants that might be only 80 or 100 megawatts. So we're starting to talk about a substantial contribution now to kind of the grid in Alberta. And when we look at breaking that down, almost all of those systems are solar. There's a small proportion of wind, and then a small proportion of other systems, such as biomass, for example, and a couple of run-of-river hydro systems. But almost all of those microgeneration systems are in the solar space. So that's just by way of context what we're looking at here in terms of solar in Alberta. So what's solar offset? So solar offset is basically a platform that's intended to allow the owners of small-scale clean energy systems, and it can be solar and wind, but as we saw from the last graph, there aren't too many small wind systems in the province. But owners of those small microgeneration renewable systems can work together to basically get paid for the greenhouse gas emission reductions that they're making. So previous to this kind of program, large utility companies who are operating like the large wind farms, for example, down in the south of the province, have been getting paid to do this exact thing. They've been able to create what's called a carbon offset from the greenhouse gas emission reductions that they've been making. And they have literally created and sold millions of these over the years, making millions and millions of dollars. But people who had small systems couldn't participate because basically the sort of economic barrier to entry was too high. It cost too much to create those kind of offsets unless you were running a really big system. So the idea behind solar offset basically is to allow people with these small systems to club together and make it economic for everyone to work together and create these carbon offsets and return an additional stream of revenue to everyone who has one of these systems installed. And just as an example, a 10 kilowatt system, we're estimating could make anywhere between $1,700 and $4,000 over a 10-year period. The reason that that's quite a large kind of variable we'll get into as we go through the presentation, but it's all to do with the price of carbon within the Alberta marketplace, basically. And speaking of that, how is this even possible? How does this work? Well, basically, within Alberta, in order to kind of reduce greenhouse gas emissions from industry, Alberta actually has been regulating industrial greenhouse gas emissions since 2007. We were actually the first jurisdiction in North America to put a price on carbon emissions for industry, something that not many people know about our province. And the current legislation that does this is called TIER, the Technology Innovation and Emission Reduction Regulation. And basically what it says is the largest industries or largest industrial sites in Alberta, so oil sands, gas plants, power plants, pulp and paper mills, chemical plants, fertilizer plants, etc. Those kind of facilities are basically given a target by the government. They have to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by a set amount. If they aren't able to meet those targets, then they basically have to pay a penalty. For every ton of carbon emissions that they weren't supposed to emit, they have to buy what's called a fund credit from the government. So that costs them money. The current price for a fund credit is $50 a ton. An alternative to that, apologies that this doesn't show up properly. I had to remove the animation from this, which I had previously, just to make this work for Zoom. But the alternative to this is to buy an offset credit. So an offset credit is basically something that is created by a non-regulated entity. So that can be a homeowner, it can be a small industrial facility, it can be a farm, it can be a small commercial facility. Basically anyone who's not required to make that reduction by the government. And an offset credit represents a single ton of Alberta-based voluntary greenhouse gas emission reductions. And obviously one way of creating an offset credit then is to generate clean electricity from solar power or from wind power installations. So far, so good, right? However, to actually create offset credits is not a simple process. The government requires rigorous data collection, calculation, storage, quantification, and it requires independent third-party verification. So basically, an auditor has to come in and check all the data for the project and confirm that everything has been done properly, all the systems are eligible, all the calculations were done correctly, everything is valid. And that's a good thing for the environment, right? That adds integrity to the system and means that a greenhouse gas emission reduction being turned into an offset credit is genuine, right? It's actually happened and people are getting paid for the right kind of things. But it also adds expense, right? Because you've got to collect the data, you have to store that data, you have to do the calculations, you have to understand how to do all of that as well, of course. And then you have to pay for this professional verifier to come in and go through things with a fine-tooth comb. And that's why it's not been possible for really small emission reduction projects to create offset credits in the past. Our plan is with solar offset is to change that narrative, basically. Allowing individual solar and wind installations to club together and overcome that economic barrier by basically creating an economy of scale. So who's eligible to take part in solar offset? Well, you have to own the system. It's got to be in Alberta. It has to be grid connected. So unfortunately, off-grid systems are not allowed to be included in this. And this is all based upon the Alberta government's rules. It has to be over the 5 kilowatt mark, but below the 5 megawatt mark. because once you go above 5 megawatts, you're no longer classed as microgeneration. It has to have been first generating after January 2nd, 2012. So that's quite some time ago now. And you have to have the rights to the offset credits. And what that means is you can't have signed up for another program that does something similar. You can't have received a grant for installing your system that also claimed that what are often called the environmental attributes. So basically, some grants will claim the emission reductions when you get them. So some grants won't, some grants will. So if you haven't had a grant for a system, it's something we have to check. So some of the common ones, things like the Canada Greener Homes Grant, for example, which is a popular grant program right now, does not claim emission reductions. And so you can get the Canada Greener Homes Grant and you can participate in solar offset. Same if you're looking at something like a community energy improvement program, which is in place about to be in place here in Calgary, about to be in place in Edmonton, is in place in Devon and Rocky Mountain House and a few other places. They also don't claim it. So you can get that kind of incentive and you can get solar offset. So there's a few eligibility criteria. Basically, if you meet all of those, you can participate. So how much can people basically make? How much will they get paid? So basically, to explain how this works, the government basically sets a rate at which offset credits are created. So they basically say for every 1,000 kilowatt hours of clean electricity that you produce, we will give you 0.57 offset credits, right? And so basically, the more clean energy you generate, the more you can expect to make, because the more offset credits you're going to make, right? And it's all based upon the number of offset credits that your system would make. But the value of offset credits itself, they're not fixed. It floats on the marketplace. So in the same way that, the price that you pay for electricity varies, unless you're on a fixed rate, obviously. But if, the price for electricity in the marketplace varies, the price for gas varies, the price for offset varies as well. It's a commodity, but it does generally very closely follow that penalty fee, the fund credit price that I mentioned earlier. So this is the price that industry has to pay the government if they don't meet their emission reduction obligations. And that price is currently set at $50 a ton. It's expected to go up to $170 a ton by 2030. So some of you may have seen that just in the last couple of weeks, the federal Liberal government released their emission reduction plan, and they've reconfirmed that this is their intention for carbon pricing in Canada. And so it's intended to go up by $15 a year as of next year. So it will go to $65 a ton, then it'll go to $80 a ton, and so on until we hit $170 a ton in 2030. So we're expecting to see that the price of, or the value of offset credits will rise over time. Now that's dependent upon what happens in the marketplace, but that's where we're expecting things to go. Then the third piece then for calculating this is the amount that you get back from the program depends upon the size of your system, because the administration costs for collecting the data, going through the verification, and all the other things that need to be done basically don't vary according to the size of your system. They're more or less fixed. So the larger your system, the more of the offset credit revenue basically gets returned to you, as you can kind of see here on this slide. But the important thing here is that you keep a percentage here. And that's important to bear in mind, because as the price or the value of carbon in the marketplace goes up over time, you're going to benefit more from that. So if whoever's in this system, whoever's part of solar offset, they're going to get paid more as the value for carbon rises over time. So that's how we end up with this 10 kilowatt system might generate between $1,700 and $4,000 over a 10-year period. And that 10-year period is basically, again, a government rule. We're not allowed to generate offset credits from a system for any longer than that. So 1,700 is based upon a 10 kilowatt system producing the average amount for Alberta, which I showed right back at the start of that presentation. That sort of 1,276 kilowatt hours per installed kilowatt. So based upon that average installation, and a $50 per ton price. So if the value of carbon never goes above $50 a ton for 10 years, that system would make about $1,700 over the 10 years. So being paid about $170 a year for 10 years. On the other hand, if that price of carbon escalates up to that $170 a ton by 2030, it's going to make $4,000. Similarly, then the example below is just for a larger system, so a small kind of commercial scale system, perhaps on a large building or in a farm. A 100 kilowatt system could be making somewhere between $22,000 and $51,500 over the 10-year period. So it's not an insubstantial contribution in terms of the payback that you can get on the system, and this is really important for us. Is the intent behind this program is to get an extra revenue stream in the hands of the system owners to make solar and wind but more affordable, right, for the average person, right? Because it's a substantial capital investment for most people, and you're saving on your electricity bills, and particularly recently, that's a big saving because electricity's got very expensive, as I'm sure you're all aware. But this is an extra thing that's hopefully going to encourage people to say, yeah, I can take the plunge. This makes sense for me to invest in solar. And for those people who've already got a solar system, well, this is, again, it's like a reward. Here you go. This is extra money in your pockets. Now you've already got solar. Maybe you can go do something else with that money. Maybe you're going to invest in an EV next, or a heat pump, or whatever it's going to be. But that money is going to be returned and you can do something good with that. And I think that's my part here just done in terms of the overview of the system. Aubrey's going to quickly talk about the data side of things, and then we'll open it up for questions and comments.
So yeah, for each system, so there's going to be probably hundreds, maybe even thousands of systems across the province, and they'll all be producing the data. And what we need is daily production data. So we'll calculate it by monthly, but in order for the verification to have the granularity that they want to see, we need to have the data on a daily basis. The second kind of data that we need is ownership data. So do they have all of the documents that prove that they own the system, that they live where they say they live, those kinds of things. And as you can imagine, when you spread this across hundreds, maybe thousands of households, that becomes overwhelming to do by hand. Next slide, Graham. Yeah, so in our app, so we're building a web app for collecting and calculating the data. We'll be able to collect the data quickly, easily. The owner can go and submit their production data. We'll actually be able to access the inverter's APIs. So all of these, I mean, if you have a system, then you've seen your own production data on your system's app. As long as we have that access, which these inverters do allow, we can get all that without having to even interact with the system owner. We can just get that data from their system directly. And then they'll give us the documents on an annual basis to say they still own the system, they still are producing the power, they all of the documents, and then we can go create the credits, sell them on the market, and then return the portion that the owners get back to them within a few months, basically. But basically, as soon as those are sold, we can return that money on an annual basis. Ready for you, Graham.
Okay, thanks, Aubrey. So we have a website. It has a calculator on it, has all sorts of information on that. If anyone's interested, they can go and plug in the data and see, okay, I've got an 8.5 kilowatt system. What could that make? You can also go onto our kind of sign up, and we can check your eligibility. As I mentioned, one of the key things we have to check is if your system was partly or fully funded by a grant, whether or not you're still eligible. So that can all be done kind of via our website, and any other information that you can think of. I think we've got it pretty comprehensively covered on there. So that's pretty much it in terms of the presentation. Really happy to sort of take any questions, but yeah, appreciate everybody's time and attention. Thank you.
So I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Oliver.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. It was very informative. So I'm wondering, when, you know, I don't have a microsystem yet. I'm deciding if this is something for me to install here in Cochrane, but I can see more and more salespeople from, you know, from companies walking from door to door, offering their service and the installation of one of these systems.
Mm.
The offset credit, I believe, is never mentioned in their sales pitch.
Mm.
They just say if it's grid tied, the energy provider will give you a certain amount, or will give you credits for whatever you produce. So the offset credit is on top of what the salesperson is showing us.
Yeah, that's right, Oliver. So essentially, when you get a solar, if you get a solar installation in Alberta, then when you are generating more energy than you're using, you're going to be feeding that electricity back onto the grid, and you will get paid for that electricity as it goes onto the grid. And that's basically, you're just getting paid as a generator of electricity at that stage, essentially. So yes, something like the solar offset, the carbon offset, is in addition to that. So you would get paid for your electricity that goes onto the grid, but you'd also get paid by solar offset for all of the electricity that your system generates, whether you used that yourself or whether it was exported onto the grid. So the whole portion of generation from your system would get paid for by this program.
So the electricity provider wouldn't use my system to trade anything on offset markets?
No. So unless you'd had an agreement with them, which you won't do as a microgenerator, then no, the rights to this, they belong to you, basically. The system owner owns the rights to the environmental attributes. As I said, the only potential exception to that is if you have received a grant. Some grants will take ownership of the credits. So if you're down in, for example, Medicine Hat, they have a solar incentive program, and they explicitly say in the legal kind of contract you sign for that grant, we're basically going to take the right to the offsets, right? So that depends from grant to grant. Cochrane, you can get Cochrane has an incentive program, I believe. I think it does, or am I mixing it up with Canmore? I might be mixing it up with Canmore. Anyway, but yeah, you just need to check, basically. And this is why we always ask people, it's like, send in your information and we check, because there's a lot of different grants that we have to go through and just say, okay, is this going to affect your ability to sort of claim credits or not, Oliver?
And not to make it much longer, I see people raising their hands. Does the federal government announced a new grant, I believe, available to people installing these systems, which was not there about 6 months ago. This would not impact the offset credit either, I believe.
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, the main one that the federal government's offering is the Canada Greener Homes Grant, and they've just, you know, in the last kind of announcement they made a couple of weeks ago, they've announced an extra lot of money for that. And no, that grant does not affect you claiming offset credits. And the Canada Greener Homes Grant can get you up to, I think, $5,000. So you can get $5,000 up front for, you know, to help offset the capital cost of the system. And then in terms of, you know, your running costs, you're saving on your electricity, you're getting paid for any electricity that you are actually able to export onto the grid. And through this program, you can also get paid for the carbon value of that as well. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Graham, for explaining it. Very, very knowledgeable.
You're welcome.
Got Shane next on the list for raised hands there.
Thanks, Ross. Questions. I guess I have two questions about the business side of things. So first of all, what's your business model, and like do you kind of take a cut from the proceeds of these offsets? And then second of all, is there anyone else doing this same sort of business in Alberta?
Yep. Yeah, happy to answer both those questions, Shane. Yeah, I mean, exactly that. We're taking a cut. It's a percentage-based model. So you keep a percentage, we keep a percentage that covers essentially all of the sort of running costs, as well as all of the third-party costs that need to be paid, like the auditor, and the registry and all of its fees. All those things are covered by our fee. As well as we also are putting aside 10% of all the profits from the program into a social initiative called Solar Torch, which will basically return funding to training in solar energy. So we'll be working with a partner organization, which we haven't selected yet, but just as an example of the type of people we're thinking of, someone like Iron and Earth, who are focused on providing training to Indigenous workers and transitioning oil sector workers who want to get into the kind of clean energy sector. So we're going to put aside 10% of all the profits from our side into that program as well. So yes, it's a percentage model. Is anybody else doing this? Yeah, there's one other company in particular who is doing this. They're called Radical. So you can look them up. They offer a different model. They offer you a fixed fee. And obviously, you're welcome to go have a look at that and see if you think that's better fit for you. And I'm happy to answer any questions about how our program compares. But that's you can look up Radical as well if you want an alternative, of course.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Graham.
You're welcome.
Jeff, you got your hand up next there.
Yeah, a couple questions, just an extension on who else does this. I'm wondering in North America, Europe, kind of the more mature areas, like is this sort of an established business type of model that's been proven over the longer term?
It's a really interesting question, Jeff. I mean, carbon offsets as a business model itself is very well established, both in North America and in other jurisdictions. So, there are companies who've been around for 15, 20 years whose core business basically is in kind of creating carbon offsets from all sorts of different activities, right? And in all sorts of different parts of the world. Including several, here in Alberta. So, I mean, as a business, yes, it's well established. It's very viable. Is anybody else doing kind of specifically kind of solar offsets from microgeneration? I think there have been some internationally. There are not any that I'm aware of to date in North America. There has been in the past an attempt to do this in Alberta a number of years ago, but there was a couple of things that were different then than now. One was the price of carbon was very low several years ago because the government regulated price was very low, and there also weren't that many people who had systems, as we kind of saw in that graph from that early on in my presentation. The number of systems in the last 5 years has gone from that kind of 1,500 to 8,000 in Alberta. So 5 years ago there weren't that many systems to choose from, many of whom had been grant funded, and the price of carbon was low. So it's been tried before in Alberta, but the conditions weren't right. We think the conditions have changed now, and this is the right time to be doing this and helping to sort of push people towards that sort of energy transition, basically, Jeff.
Yeah, no, I think it's a brilliant idea, and the time, as you say, the timing is right. The second question is a quick one, but so from the homeowner's perspective, the revenue from the offset credit, is that taxable in your personal taxes?
That's an excellent question, Jeff, and I'll be 100% honest with you. I don't know the answer, and I'm going to have to go and find that one out. It's a very good question. Yeah, I will actually have to get back to you on that, Jeff. I actually don't know what the answer to that is. So thank you for raising that, because I will go and find that out. And yeah, I don't know if there's a way for us to distribute after the event any kind of questions like that where we didn't have an answer. Is there? Ross is nodding. So yes, I'll make sure that we get an answer to that, and Ross can get that to everybody on the call, because that's an excellent.
Yeah, because I mean, you could imagine if it's just treated like any other source of revenue, that it could be taxable. But the government would want, I think, to have incentives, right, so that it's not taxable, to encourage people to actually do this sort of thing. So
yeah.
I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Manek, you got your hand up next there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Graham, for the nice presentation. So I had 3 questions. I'll make them quick. Yeah. So one question, the first question is about the quality of carbon credits. We usually talk about compliance market and voluntary market. Yeah. With the compliance market, the price as of now is $50 per ton in 2022. But I have also looked at the other reports where they talk about voluntary market, where the price kind of fluctuates all the way from $1 up to $45 or even $50. So, so when we are looking at this offset program and when we're doing calculations, are we safe to assume that the credits that would be generated out of this project would be, targeted to produce savings at a price of $50 per ton, that compliance market?
Yeah, absolutely, Mayank. Yeah, that's thanks for the question. Good question. Yeah, there's no doubt that this program is 100% geared towards the Alberta compliance market. That there is an existing protocol, it's called, in Alberta, which basically means that you're allowed to do this within the compliance market in Alberta. Our entire program is set up and aimed at that. So all the data requirements in order to create a high quality compliance grade offset credit from these microgeneration systems, that's exactly what the platform is designed to achieve. So that we are not looking at selling any of these on the voluntary market. This will be purely sold on the Alberta compliance market, which is why we're saying here's that we're looking at $50 a ton right now and $170 a ton at 2030 potentially. So yeah, I think you said you had a couple of other questions as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, because that's one of the things that I was getting confused. The other question is about the selling of these carbon credits. So these carbon credits are being produced in Alberta. Are we allowed to sell these carbon credits outside of province or even outside of country?
So in theory, yes, you can take a credit from one jurisdiction and sell them elsewhere, but then you're getting into the voluntary marketplace. And so our intent is, as I said, Alberta basically has the best carbon price in the whole of North America. So we're in the right place here to be selling this. So there's no reason why you would want to take a credit from Alberta and sell it to another jurisdiction at this point in time, right?
Yeah, agree on that. And my final question is about the ineligible emission sources, because when I look at this protocol, what I see is that applicable transportation heating fuels to which the carbon levy applies are ineligible to generate emission offsets under this protocol. So that means what that means is that combustion emissions from fuels, subject to carbon levy, including say diesel or even propane, would not be eligible, right?
Yeah, that's right. But I mean, you have to remember, it doesn't apply in this case because obviously what we're doing is we're displacing electricity, right? And there is no direct carbon price on electricity in Alberta, which is why this protocol still exists. So you've obviously been doing your homework, Mayank. I'm very impressed at these detailed protocol questions.
Yeah, because when I was doing my calculations, I was just considering upstream emissions as a part of emissions calculations. And when I calculated savings, I took away the combustion emissions because you have the highest emission factor that goes into the combustion part of calculations, right? So what I was doing was that I was just taking away the numbers, the combustion emissions. so that I don't account them towards carbon credit calculations. So is my understanding correct?
So, I mean, I probably don't want to get segued into too much of a deep dive on the calculations, because probably not of interest to everybody. But I mean, the long and short of it is that the calculation has been made deliberately simple under the protocol by the Alberta government, and essentially that 0.57 factor that I mentioned earlier has basically rolled up everything. So that's essentially all that you really need in order to kind of estimate your kind of your carbon offsets from your production, Bianc.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Graham.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Yeah.
Zara, you're up next there.
Yes. Hi, Graham. Thanks for the presentation. My question is about the quality of the data collection that you do in this production of the solar power. For example, some of this electricity is consumed by that household, and some part is transferred to the grid. Do you collect these two stages as well, and then all the electricity get the credit, or just part of it that is transferred to the grid, you get the credit?
No, you get the credit for both parts. Because essentially what's happening in both cases is you are displacing grid electricity, right? So any energy that comes from your solar panels or your wind power system and that you use at your own property is electricity that didn't come from the grid, right? So it didn't need to be generated, or it could go to someone else. Whereas when you're exporting onto the grid, you're supplying clean energy to other people, right? So it doesn't matter whether it's been self-consumed or whether it's been exported. You get credited for the total generation of your system.
And the credit is it's live, kind of at the time that you transfer the electricity to the grid, the credit is given to you. Am I right?
So it's not instantaneous, no. Excuse me, because because everything has to be third-party verified. Essentially, what happens is we're anticipating doing this basically, getting people a check in their pockets every year. So what would happen is essentially the data would be collected for the previous year's generation from the system, and then that would go through the verification process and get converted into the carbon offsets. And then you basically be sent a check to say, okay, here it is. So it wouldn't be instantaneous. It's not going to appear on your electricity bill. It will basically be a check that you would receive, once a year for 10 years, right? But
the credit calculated at the time, or no? When it's verified, they calculate the credit, because the price would be different if it's calculated at different time, right?
So the price will be whatever the market says at the time that so basically once all the credits are verified, they're bundled together, and that's the point at which you're presenting it to the marketplace to say, we've got 10,000 tons of reductions here we want to sell, and that's when you're going to get the price, right? So it's going to be the price for whatever is on the market at that time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Gary.
And Chris is last with his hand up, and then we'll go through the questions that are in chat there.
Sure.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Aubrey. Great presentation. Just a few questions about, I guess, the size of the group that you have currently. The amount of people that are signed up would be one question. And second question would be, is there a minimum amount of energy that you need as a group in order to sort of get this business up and running, or to be able to go to market, to qualify, to be able to go to that market and sell credits?
There is, obviously, right? We can't go to the market. If we club together and there's six producers who want to get together, we're still a tiny system, right? And the whole strength of the project is based upon the idea that we have to be big enough, essentially, to kind of go together as a group and create enough clean energy savings, enough emission reduction savings that it can be economic to produce. So yes, there is a threshold. Exactly what that threshold is will partly depend again on a number of factors, right? Because different system sizes, different production rates. So I don't have a fixed number that I can say, yeah, it has to be exactly this many participants, because we could get a couple of 100 kilowatt or 200 or 300 kilowatt systems, or we might just get a whole load of homeowner scale 8, 9, 10 kilowatt systems, right? So I can't sort of say it's definitely going to be this number. I can say we're going to need a couple of megawatts of combined power to get there. So we've only just launched very recently. We're in the process of doing exactly what we're doing here right now tonight, which is trying to tell as many people as possible that we exist, and drum up interest, and we're getting a really good response. Am I at a couple of hundred systems right now? No. But I'm very confident we're going to get there. There's, as I said, there's 8,000 installations in the province. This is kind of, I hesitate to say it, but it's kind of money for nothing, in the sense of, it's like, people don't need to do anything. They've got the system. There's no risk to system owners by participating. There's no loss. There's nothing that can happen that's bad. The only thing that's going to happen is you're going to start getting an extra check through the post once a year to say, thanks for basically putting in a clean energy system. Here's your check. So I feel very confident we're going to get there, Chris. But yeah, I don't have a specific number that ding, I hit this number and I press go. It will depend on the individual systems that come forth.
No, thanks. No, and definitely understandable. And maybe this question's for Aubrey too, or for him. When you envision, let's say you did get to that threshold you were looking for, when you envision your app and the system would be ready to go to start collecting data, to be able to start the process, if you got to that threshold that you're looking for?
Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, Aubrey, it was just about if you got to the threshold that Graham was saying that you may need in order to go to market, like when are you anticipating that your app's going to be ready to go to be able to collect the data and start the process?
Okay, when? Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is once we've got everybody set up, signed up for it, we have a little bit of time to kind of build features into the app. The app itself isn't actually really the hard part. Like, everything is kind of off, I'm not going to say off the shelf, but it's all been done before, right? So we can build it in a couple months full featured, depending on how fast we need to move, so. And
we are building it as we speak. So we're moving forward. As I said, that I'm pretty bullish that this is going ahead. So we're forging ahead. We're building it right now, so that the intent is that we can basically deploy it as soon as humanly possible once we hit that threshold. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks. And I don't want to belabor it. Sorry, one last question and I'll step away. And regarding, so the percentages, the breakdowns for the money that you receive back is obviously based on the energy that you create. That's and right. So is that sort of rate locked in, Graham, for that 10 years? And then after that with the group, if it was still going, this is still a viable option, look at those percentages again, or is that always going to be fixed, like kind of part of your model?
Yeah, I mean, essentially what we've done is we've had a look and said, okay, how much energy is likely to come from a particular system? How does that sort of translate into offset credits? What's the potential value of those offset credits on an annual basis? And then what's it going to cost to set up and run the program and pay for all those third-party costs, right? So we think we've put forward a fair deal that is putting as much back to the homeowners as possible. It likely would be fixed for the 10-year duration, but I suppose it would depend, right? If we end up with thousands of people in the program, we would probably be able to substantially improve the portion that goes back to people, right? So that I would suggest you might say is that's the bare minimum anyone's going to get. Because as I said, I'm not in this to try to make a bucket load of money. That's not the intention of the program. The intention of the program is to put money back in the pockets of the people who are putting these systems in. Because I really want this to help push that energy transition forward in the province. I think this is a market tool that can be really helpful to make us get to the clean energy future that we need to get to, and do it faster.
Awesome, thanks, Graham. And I think with the app side of things, and from your presentation, you've already got the whole business side ready and planned. It's just building the app, which is the front end that's filtering into everything else you've already done and planned and worked on, right?
Yeah, we pretty much have the, as you said, there's a business architecture kind of all figured out. And Aubrey's also done a whole lot of work already in terms of figuring out all the the data fields and things that we need, and Aubrey, obviously feel free to jump in here. And she started the process of kind of mapping all those things out and building the app. So I don't know, Aubrey, do you want to say any more about where you're at with things?
I mean, that's pretty much just, we have it all, we have it planned out, we have the back end sketched out, not fully built, but then, I mean, yeah, it'll be an app. We'll have two different front ends, one for the admin side, the verifier who can go in and actually sample the data to make sure that they're able to see the information that they want to see. And then the user's interface is just going to be, really simple. Here's the documents that we need. Here's the information that we need so that we can get into your inverter, and, a simple, indicators, whether they have the information all set up, they're good to go. They don't need to check in or anything. And then, if we have information that we need from them, a little notification to just say, hey, we need your information.
I know we're at 8 o'clock, so I know some people might be logging off. I'm just going to go to the chat now because we had some questions come in there. Thanks for everyone who came off mic and asked in person here. Sorry, I know you had asked questions in public chat here, so I'm trying to remember if this was asked or if you want to chime in for more clarity. They ask, when you calculate the production, do you subtract the consumption of that of the producer, and asking if are we considering producers as the household?
Okay, yeah, and I think this was one of the questions that was actually asked live as well. So the sort of idea of, do you have to back out your self-consumption? And the answer is no. So you get credited for the entire generation of the system.
And Jane, I think you had asked me to do some person. How long is the crediting period? I believe you said 10 years there.
Yeah, it's
for
10
that
years.
period of time.
Yeah.
Jane asks, if I'm part of if I am part of a solar program with my energy provider, Spot Power at the moment, or whoever it is there anything in the program that would make me ineligible?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and this maybe just I'll maybe explain a little bit of this for people who maybe don't know what Jane's asking about. So there are a number of retailers in Alberta, Spot Power being one of them, but by no means the only one, who offer a special kind of solar, I think they call it Solar Club tariff structure, which basically allows you to switch your tariff in the summer to a higher electricity rate, which you might at first glance think that sounds crazy. So you can choose to pay 28 cents a kilowatt hour, I think it is, under the Solar Club. But where this is clever is that when you're exporting energy, you get paid at the same rate as your tariff. And if you're exporting in the summer, you're exporting more energy than you are using, you're actually going to get more money back as a result for actually paying that higher rate. So that's what that is about. To to answer Jane's specific question, does that make you ineligible? No, it does not, right? So that's just a tariff structure. It's got no claim on your offsets.
Awesome, thank you. Mark asked, can you describe the ownership of the company? He's asking if it's a sort of proprietorship, partnership, cooperative, and any thoughts of expanding outside of Alberta?
Yeah, so I mean, so solar offset is basically it's an incorporated company, or rather, it's part of an incorporated company. I guess you could say solar offset itself is a project. So my company is actually Firefly Greenhouse Gas Consulting. So that's the company, if you like, behind things. Are we looking at expanding outside of Alberta? Yeah, absolutely we are. But Alberta is going to be, this is our home marketplace. This is where we think that we make this a success, and then yeah, we will look at doing this elsewhere. There are specific challenges with kind of taking this program to particular jurisdictions. So, for example, if you look over the border in BC, well, not only is their solar resource not very good, but also they've got entirely hydroelectricity. So what you're displacing there is essentially one clean form of energy with another, right? So there are challenges as you look across different parts of Canada with replicating this program. But yeah, sure, we're looking at opportunities to do this elsewhere in the future.
And for reference, I dropped your Firefly website linked into the chat there if they wanted to check that out, and I'll include that as well in the comments later.
Yep.
And then I believe, last question I see in chat. One of Jane's other ones, can you hold all of the credits that you've had and then claim them when the price becomes 170?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Certainly if you were running your own kind of solar farm, and you had a 10 megawatt solar farm or something, sure, right? If you wanted to, roll the dice and gamble in that manner, then that might be possible. We can't offer that kind of facility back to individual owners, essentially because we're having to go together as a group, right? So we can't kind of come back and say, well, you want to hold your credits for 1 year, you want to hold your credits for 3 years, you don't want to sell them all now. We just can't handle that kind of flexibility within things, because everyone depends upon selling at the same time, right? You have to go to the marketplace with a bunch of credits, enough credits that the marketplace is interested in and gives you a good price. So you can't start then sort of, dividing it up, because that actually would defeat the entire purpose of the program, which is to create a club with enough, if you like, sort of selling power in the marketplace that it overcomes, all those kind of economic barriers that otherwise prevent you from selling in. So as I said, yes, if you're operating your own mega solar farm or something, sure, you want to play, the emissions arbitrage game, then why not, right? But for a program like this, it's just not feasible.
Got another question in chat saying, I don't have a solar system yet, but I'm interested in solar offset. Is there a way to sign up for your newsletter without signing up as a system owner?
That's an excellent question, Shane. I think the answer right now is no. So we will add that to our website so that you can just sign up for a newsletter without actually filling out the sort of sign up sheet. And I should also note as well that the sign up sheet on our website is at this stage, it's a non-obligation sign up. Okay, so you can, if you're interested in our program and you've got solar, we're not asking anyone to commit to anything right now. We're just saying, go on there, tell us what you've got. It allows us to assess your eligibility for the program, and it allows us to return a quote, an estimate customized to your system, saying this is what we think you'll be able to get out of it. You're not obligated to do anything at this stage, right? So we're using that, and once we get enough kind of people saying, yes, we are interested, we will then come back to everyone and say, okay, right, here's the actual kind of legal agreement that allows solar offset to represent you in the marketplace, right? At that point, then the commitment would be firm. But that sign up sheet right now it's a non-obligation sign up.
Awesome, thanks. And yeah, when you set up sign up for newsletter, let me know and I can add it to the event listing and the comments in the YouTube video as well. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording there, and I'll thank everybody for coming out tonight. And for those of you watching the recording, thanks for making it all the way through, and hope you have a good evening there.